I gotta admit, the end of the Fever Mercury game made me sit up for a second because it got a little spicy with Caitlin Clark having an interaction with DeWanna Bonner out on the middle of the floor, sort of waving her back to the bench. But that interaction stood out to me for a couple of reasons. I mean, number one, obviously, is the history there, where DeWanna Bonner was on the Fever for a cup of coffee and then winds up on the Mercury. Before the season, Caitlin Clark said she wanted to win a ring for her. Right? You know, like she said, I want to win for her. And Caitlin Clark went out of her way to also, shine light on how DeWanna Bonner had risen up to the top of, near the top of the all-time WNBA scoring ranks. And then,
This wasn't just a clash on the court. This wasn't just two competitors letting emotions boil over in the heat of the moment. No, what you just witnessed was something far colder. It was loyalty being shattered in public. It was trust being weaponized. It was revenge, calculated, deliberate, and executed with chilling precision. Caitlin Clark didn't just wave her hand that night. She sent a message so sharp that it cut through the noise of the game itself. A single flick of the wrist turned into a viral moment, a career-defining humiliation, and a reminder of exactly who she is. But to really understand it, you can't just look at the clip. You have to rewind the tape, because this story doesn't start with a sarcastic wave. It starts months earlier with words of loyalty, promises of respect, and a relationship that should have been unbreakable. Before the season even began, Caitlin Clark stood in front of the cameras and pledged her loyalty to one person, DeWanna Bonner. She said she wanted to win a ring for her. She hyped her up, praised her legacy, and welcomed her to Indiana with open arms. Clark didn't just accept Bonner, she endorsed her, she vouched for her, she tied her own reputation to hers. But that loyalty, it wasn't honored, it wasn't even acknowledged. It was discarded like it meant nothing. And when loyalty gets thrown back in your face, there are only two options. You swallow it, or you make them regret it. Clark chose the second option. And tonight, we're going to uncover how a simple, sarcastic wave turned into the most devastating act of revenge the WNBA has seen in years. We're going to trace the betrayal, the bad blood, the history that no one's talking about, and the calculated moment where Clark seized complete control of the narrative without even playing a minute. Stick with me, because nothing about this was coincidence. Not the silence, not the betrayal, and definitely not the wave. This wasn't a fight. This was an execution. Before the betrayal, before the wave, there was loyalty. And not just casual, throwaway loyalty, the kind of loyalty that could have built a dynasty if it had been honored. When DeWanna Bonner signed with the Indiana Fever as a free agent, the narrative was clear. She wasn't just another veteran moving teams. She was the missing piece, the steady hand, the veteran presence who would guide a young roster into contention. And at the heart of that promise was Caitlin Clark. Caitlin didn't hesitate to buy in. She didn't treat Bonner like just another teammate. She treated her like a partner in destiny. She went on record saying she wanted to win a ring for her. She hyped her up, praised her legacy, and welcomed her to Indiana with open arms. Clark didn't just accept Bonner, she believed in her. She embraced her leadership, tied her own reputation to hers.
These weren't empty words. They were public. They were intentional. Clark was putting her own name, her own reputation, and her own credibility on the line to uplift Bonner. And let's be clear, Caitlin Clark didn't have to do that. She's the star. She's the future of the Fever. But she chose to share that spotlight, to spread the shine, and to welcome Bonner with open arms. To fans, it looked like the perfect partnership. The fresh face of the league paired with the seasoned veteran who had seen it all. One bringing the hype, the other bringing stability. Together, they were supposed to be unstoppable. But loyalty is a fragile thing. It takes years to build and only seconds to destroy. And for Caitlin Clark, those seconds were coming fast. Loyalty only matters if it's returned. And for Caitlin Clark, that loyalty wasn't just ignored, it was betrayed. After just 9 games, Dana Bonner wanted out. No warning, no explanation, no conversation with the teammates who had welcomed her, praised her, and treated her like the final piece of their puzzle. She simply requested her release, packed her bags, and walked away. Now, on the surface, you could argue this was business as usual. Players switch teams all the time. Contracts end, trades happen, opportunities change. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a cold business move. This was personal. Because Bonner didn't just leave, she vanished. No goodbye in the locker room, no text in the team group chat, no professional courtesy to say, thanks for the opportunity, good luck the rest of the way. Nothing. She ghosted them all. And the only reason we know how deep this wound cut is because one player had the courage to speak up, Sophie Cunningham. On her podcast, Cunningham pulled back the curtain, telling fans exactly what went down. She revealed how Bonner disappeared without a word, leaving behind stunned teammates who couldn't believe they'd been discarded so carelessly. Her words painted the picture clearly. It's okay to be professional about it, send a text, let your teammates know, but she couldn't even do that. Imagine the sting of that moment. Caitlin Clark had gone on record praising Bonner, pledging her loyalty, telling the world she wanted to win a ring for her. And how was that loyalty repaid? With silence, with absence, with complete disregard. For most players, it might have been brushed off as another tough break in a league full of them. But not for Caitlin Clark. She doesn't forget slights. She doesn't forgive disrespect. She files it away, sharpens it, and waits for the right time to make it sting just as badly as it stung her. And let's not downplay what Sophie Cunningham herself admitted. There was a little beef. A little beef? That's the understatement of the year. This wasn't just tension. This was a fracture so deep that it split trust at the core. And Caitlin Clark was never gonna let it slide. To really understand how deep this betrayal cut, you have to rewind further. Because the truth is, Caitlin Clark and Dana Bonner weren't strangers to conflict. The tension between them didn't start in Indiana. It started long before.
Go back to the previous season, when Bonner was still with the Connecticut Sun. The Fever and Sun clashed in the playoffs, and the atmosphere was already thick with pressure. Every possession mattered. Every whistle, or lack of one, could swing the game. And then came that moment. Clark drove to the basket, absorbed contact, and expected the whistle. But nothing came. No call, no foul, just silence. And for Caitlin Clark, silence on the court feels a lot like disrespect. Frustrated, she let Bonner know exactly how she felt. A verbal exchange, a shove, nothing violent, nothing headline-worthy at the time, but enough to show there was no love lost between the two. For Bonner, it was just another possession. For Clark, it was a seed planted, a seed of bad blood that would grow with every future encounter. Because that's how Clark operates. She doesn't just play the game, she remembers the game. Every shove, every no call, every smirk from an opponent gets filed away in her mental playbook. And Bonner had just earned herself a page in that book. So, when Bonner walked away from Indiana without so much as a goodbye, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was fuel poured on a fire that had already been smoldering since that playoff clash. The shove, the words, the history. The betrayal didn't just cut deep because Bonner left. It cut deep because it confirmed what Clark had already suspected. Bonner was never really on her side. And if you think Clark was going to let that slide, you don't understand her at all. September 2nd, 2025. On paper, it looked like just another regular season game, Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury. But beneath the surface, it was anything but ordinary. Caitlin Clark had been sidelined for 19 straight games with a nagging groin injury. For weeks, fans wondered when she'd return, if she'd return. She wasn't lacing up sneakers, she wasn't the one dropping dimes or draining threes. That night, she was in street clothes, sitting on the bench like an afterthought. At least, that's what Bonner thought. From the opening tip, the game itself was forgettable. But the real drama unfolded during a timeout. Bonner, frustrated over a call, started jawing at the refs. That part wasn't unusual. Veterans complain, that's part of the game. But the where mattered.
Bonner didn't just argue her case at mid-court or near her own bench. No, she strutted right toward the Fever sideline, right in front of Caitlin Clark. It was a power move, plain and simple. A way of saying, I'm still here and you can't touch me. Bonner thought she was picking on an easy target, an injured player, a superstar who couldn't fight back. But here's the mistake she made. She forgot who she was dealing with. Clark wasn't just sitting there idly. She was watching, waiting, calculating. To Bonner, this was a chance to puff out her chest, to look tough in front of the cameras. But in reality, she was stepping directly into a perfectly laid trap, one she didn't even know existed.
Because Caitlin Clark doesn't need a basketball in her hands to dominate. She doesn't need to be on the court to control the narrative. And on that night, from the sidelines, she was about to flip the script entirely. What Bonner thought was her chance to assert dominance was about to turn into her greatest humiliation. The timeout buzzed, the players shuffled, and the arena noise deeped just enough for voices to cut through. Bonner was still jawing, waving her arms, barking at the refs like the call had cost her the championship. To the casual fan, it looked like a routine veteran complaint. To anyone sitting close enough, it was clear she was performing, loud on purpose, planting herself right in front of the Fever bench, right in front of Caitlin Clark. And that's when it happened. Clark, dressed in sweats, no jersey, no sneakers, stood up. She didn't have to say much. She didn't raise her voice. But the second she opened her mouth, the dynamic shifted. It's not a foul. Simple, direct, cold. She said it once, then again, and again. Each repetition sharper than the last, like a scalpel slicing through Bonner's complaints. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't flustered. She was correcting her in front of everyone. And the beauty of it? Courtside microphones caught the exchange. The very audio the league probably wishes had been buried ended up amplifying the moment. Fans heard it clear as day. Clark dismantling Bonner, not with anger, but with facts. Bonner tried to keep the show going, puffing her chest, gesturing, trying to look unfazed. But the cracks were there. The body language told the story. For all her bluster, she wasn't in control anymore. Clark had flipped the script. An injured rookie, a so-called non-factor, had just put a veteran in check with nothing but her voice. And the real blow hadn't even landed yet. And then, it happened. The moment that froze the arena, silenced the arguments, and shifted the balance of power with nothing more than a flick of the wrist. Bonner kept talking, kept puffing her chest, trying to prove she was still in control. But Clark wasn't rattled. She wasn't playing defense. She was waiting for the exact second to strike. And when it came, she didn't need words. She didn't need volume. She only needed one motion. The wave. Not a friendly wave. Not even an annoyed wave. This was something else entirely. A slow, sarcastic, condescending flick of the hand, dismissing Bonner like she was an insect buzzing too close to the food at a summer picnic. It was brutal in its simplicity. Clark didn't shove her. She didn't scream in her face. She didn't even break a sweat. Instead, she dismissed her. She reduced a veteran with years of experience, with thousands of points on her resume, into a nuisance, insignificant, irrelevant, unworthy of further attention. And in that instant, everyone in the arena knew exactly what it meant. That wave wasn't just Clark saying, "Go back to your bench." It was Clark saying, "You betrayed me. You disrespected me. You are nothing to me now." The crowd felt it. The cameras caught it. Social media turned it into a meme before the final buzzer even sounded. But for Bonner, it wasn't just a meme. It was a scar. A humiliation so sharp that no box score, no highlight reel, no stat line could erase it. Because this wasn't about points. Bonner had 19 that night, but nobody cared. The headlines weren't about her buckets. They were about the wave. The ultimate power move. A single, sarcastic gesture that transformed months of betrayal, silence, and bad blood into one of the coldest revenge moments in league history. And Caitlin Clark delivered it while wearing street clothes. The final buzzer sounded, but by then, the game was already forgotten. The Mercury walked away with the win, Bonner walked away with 19 points, and none of it mattered. Because the only thing anyone was talking about wasn't the scoreboard. It was the wave. Clips flooded social media within minutes. Fans captioned it with everything from pressed to salty to finished. Memes popped up instantly. Bonner swatted away like a fly. Bonner reduced the background noise. Bonner dismissed with the kind of casual cruelty only Caitlin Clark could deliver. And here's the irony. Bonner thought she was making Clark look small, jawing at her in street clothes, trying to show up a superstar who couldn't even play. Instead, Clark flipped it. Without ever touching the basketball, she made Bonner look desperate, rattled, and utterly irrelevant. For fans, it was comedy gold. For Clark, it was a masterclass in control. But for Bonner, it was humiliation. A legacy moment she'll never escape. Because this wasn't just a viral clip. It was an erasure. In the biggest spotlight of the night, Bonner wasn't remembered for her scoring, her veteran leadership, or her performance. She was remembered for being waved off, for being dismissed like she didn't even belong. Think about how devastating that is. A player with years of experience, thousands of minutes logged, reduced to a punchline by someone not even in uniform. That's not just embarrassing, that's legacy defining. That's the kind of moment that follows you forever. And here's the chilling part. Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw a punch. She didn't need to. She dismantled Bonner with facts and then buried her with the gesture so effortless it almost looked casual. It wasn't casual. It was calculated. And the internet understood it instantly. Clark's wave wasn't just the dismissal of Bonner. It was a statement to the entire league. You come for me, and this is what happens. At first, it looked like a petty moment. A flick of the wrist, the viral meme, a clip for the highlight reels. But the wave was bigger than that, much bigger. Because in the WNBA, power isn't just about how many points you score. It's about perception. It's about who controls the spotlight, who shapes the narrative, and who owns the conversation. And in that single motion, Caitlin Clark reminded everyone that she controls all three. Bonner wanted to expose her. Instead, she exposed the league's biggest problem. They can't break Clark. They can push her around physically. They can freeze her out on the court. They can target her with cheap fouls, body checks, and whispers behind the scenes. But none of it works. Even without touching the basketball, Clark dominates. And that's terrifying for the veterans, because it proves something they don't want to admit. She doesn't need their approval to shine. She doesn't need to score 40 to own the headlines. All she has to do is be herself, and the league bends around her. That's why the wave mattered. It wasn't just the clap back at Bonner. It was Clark saying to the entire WNBA, "You tried to shut me out, you tried to break me, and I'm still here, stronger, louder, untouchable." And fans ate it up. Clark supporters saw it as the ultimate revenge. Even casual viewers, people who barely follow women's basketball, saw the clip and instantly understood the power dynamic. The rookie, the supposed outsider, reduced a seasoned vet into a viral footnote. But beneath the memes, the bigger picture is darker. Because if one rookie can do this much damage with the gesture, what happens when she starts winning championships? What happens when her influence grows even bigger, when the league can no longer contain the storm she's bringing? The veterans know it, the front offices know it, and deep down, even the WNBA itself knows it. Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She's a disruptor, a force rewriting the rules of the league in real time. And the wave? That wasn't just about Bonner. That was a warning shot. So let's be clear. What you just saw wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random flare-up between two competitors. It was a chapter, a carefully placed brick in a much bigger wall being built around Caitlin Clark. Dana Bonner's betrayal set the stage. The confrontation gave Clark her revenge. But the real story isn't about one player.
The real story is about the pattern, the constant targeting, the calculated disrespect, the way veterans keep lining up thinking they'll be the one to humble her. They all make the same mistake. They don't realize Clark is 2 steps ahead every single time. They don't realize she's cataloging every slight, every betrayal, every dirty hit, and storing it away, waiting for the perfect moment to turn it back on them. The league thinks they're testing a rookie. What they're really doing is building a monster. They're creating a version of Caitlin Clark who doesn't just want to win, she wants to expose. And that should terrify everyone. Because if this is the kind of revenge she delivers from the bench, when she's injured, when she has no ball in her hands, what happens when she's fully healthy again? What happens when she's on the court, in rhythm, in control, with the power to settle scores in real time? You think Bonner's way was brutal? That was just the prologue. The war against Caitlin Clark is only beginning, and the only question left is, who's next?